Hey, Peace Psychos, Miss Lerner here. I am here to go over emotion and motivation today with you. Okay, so before we get to the multiple choice questions, I wanted to go over the different theories of emotion and motivation. It's not an exhaustive list. You may have noticed that in your 5 steps to a five, they have some other theories, um, like in terms of emotional theories, they have opponent process theory, um, which just means that as one emotion um, occurs, the other one is suppressed, just like opponent process theories in terms of vision. All right. So I have this little chart here. It says what would happen if I saw a snake. So upon seeing a snake, I will first have physiological arousal and then I will feel afraid. So what is the emotional theory that physiological arousal occurs first? Well, my friends, that would be the James Lang theory of emotion. Okay. Then I had said that there's another emotional theory where you experience arousal and emotion at the same exact time, simultaneously. Okay. And that is Cannon Bard. Right? Picture, Shakespeare getting shot out of a cannon because he was a bard. All right. Then arguably the most applied theory to FRQs and such is going to be the next one. So, upon seeing a snake, I will first have physiological arousal and at the same time have a conscious cognitive interpretation of the situation. And as a result, then I will feel afraid. Okay. Um, so, there's two things there, the physiological arousal and the cognitive interpretation of the situation. So we know that that must be the two-factor theory, the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory, or as I like to call it, the Schachter two-factor. Okay, so Schachter-Singer two-factor. Okay, so just a reminder in terms of this theory. Um, just a reminder in terms of this theory, we had the bridge study. There was a bridge where men were approached by an attractive woman and asked a number of questions, and then the woman gave her number out to the men to follow up with the study's results. And the men on the high bridge had mislabeled or misattributed their arousal to being attracted to the woman. So a lot of them called to ask her out afterwards. Okay, this is a typical example of the Shakta two factor. Okay, another one. If I am given a drug that promotes arousal, but I don't know that it promotes arousal, and then I'm placed in a room with like an angry Confederate or someone who's working with the experimenter, I'm likely to be angry too. That's called the spillover effect. Okay. Um, and then we have the last two, which sort of talk about the cognitive piece, but say that it might not necessarily be at a conscious level. Okay. So Zion's and Ladeau's theory, they they say that, you know what? I don't think there's a U in here. Okay. Um, Regardless, they say that upon seeing a snake, you're going to feel fear, okay, without at a conscious level, but and then you may step back from the situation afterwards and say, "Well, how am I supposed to feel about this?" Okay, it's not necessarily. It's like a knee jerk going straight from your thalamus to the amygdala. And then there's like a higher road in which you are going to process that information afterwards. So I hear a sound and I immediately have that visceral reaction of fear before I say, "Oh, someone's in my house," or "Oh, that was nothing." All right, and then lastly, okay, is going to be a theory that says you feel afraid and you cognitively appraise how to feel with or without consciousness. Okay, so um, I get a paperback from my English teacher, and it has a C on it. Okay, and all of a sudden I feel my heart kind of drops a little bit. I worked really hard on the paper, but at the same time, at a conscious level, sometimes this is conscious, I might think to myself, well, a C is a really good paper from this teacher. Okay. So you step back for a moment and you try to think about how the situation affects you and how you're going to deal with it. And that's what's called the cognitive appraisal theory. And that was derived by Richard Lazarus. Okay, this is the hard stuff. I mean, really, really, really know the difference among these three: James Lang, Kennan-Bard, Schechter-Singer. Okay, then we have theories of motivation. Remember that root, mote, emotion, and motivation, they are drawn together with the meaning to move. You are moved by your emotions, and your emotions are going to cause you to do things. Okay, so your book goes over 4 major theories of motivation. There's one that is kind of that you could kind of build off of a little bit more as well, but let's talk about this. Specific biological innate fixed action patterns govern our behaviors. Fixed action pattern was just another name for instincts. Okay, and an appropriate example of instinct theory would be an infant rooting for food. Okay, in case you didn't realize it from the other review activities, rooting isn't going hoo 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 hoo. Rooting is you touch the infant's cheek and they turn in the direction of food. Okay, I don't have to teach someone to do that. They are motivated by something that is inborn. Okay. Then there's a theory of motivation that says the needs produce specific drives that motivate behavior until the drive is reduced. Well, that's drive reduction theory. Really, the major examples of this theory would be hunger and thirst. Oopsies. Oops, Happa. Hunger and thirst. Associated with drives are going to be incentives. Incentives don't necessarily have to be biological, however. They can be more secondary, things that are associated with biological drives. Then motivation is based on maintaining an optimal level of arousal. So that would be arousal theory. Okay, and this explains things like thrill seeking and curiosity, our need for information, our need to understand what's going on in the world. So remember, with arousal, overarchingly, there's something called the Yerkes-Dodson law. Okay, it's also known sometimes as the inverted U function. That just says that for most tasks, the optimal level of arousal is going to be moderate. Okay, but that being said, it's going to be dependent on task difficulty. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, for a task that is pretty well practiced, relatively, easy, we're going to want high levels of arousal, which is why you would want, an athlete to perform in front of a lot of people. Okay, for something that is complex and a novel task, you would want a lower level of arousal. I had said in class, you don't want to do brain surgery with doctors around you going, cut that corpus callosum, sever it. Okay. All right. So lastly, motivation is based on needs which occur in a hierarchical order. That is going to be Maslow's humanistic theory, or also known as the hierarchy of needs. Okay, and any sort of example in which you are fulfilling the needs in order. So right now, that people are attending to physiological and safety needs over belongingness, because we are unfortunately separated from one another. Okay. Let's move on to the multiple choice. All right. Which aspects of hunger are controlled by the lateral and ventromedial hypothalamus? So the hypothalamus has all of the F's: food, fluid, fight, flight, um, fornication, and Fahrenheit. Okay, so contraction, expansion of the stomach. Nothing about the stomach. It does have to do with eating. Body temperature and desire to eat. Well, yeah, the hypothalamus itself, but lateral and ventromedial. Desire to eat and the physiological processes needed for eating and digestion, such as salivation. We'll leave that. Binge and purge cycle? No. The desire to eat and the feeling of satiety or fullness that makes us stop eating. That is correct. Okay. So if the lateral hypothalamus is activated, you grow laterally. Okay. You get bigger. If the ventromedial hypothalamus is activated, you grow vertically. You get skinnier. If I lesion out the ventromedial hypothalamus in a rat, they will eat themselves to death. Okay. And these things are also those parts of the hypothalamus also are related to thirst as well. So like the lateral hypothalamus, when it's activated, you get thirsty. Leptin, a fat protein that causes hunger when its levels are low, is going to be, oopsies, I didn't mean to do that, is going to be secreted by fat cells. Okay, so when leptin levels are high, you feel like you're satisfied. Okay, so leptin itself is going to when leptin rises, it decreases hunger. When ghrelin rises, your stomach is growling, and that's going to make you want to eat. Okay, when asked, what is it that makes your life meaningful? People are most likely to answer money, close relationships, a satisfying career, an average level intelligence, or a specific talent or skill. The answer here is close relationships. Your need for affiliation, according to psychological studies, is going to trump many of your other needs, like your need for achievement or success or power. So, hopefully we get through this whole process together. All right, all of the following are identified as important factors in the causes of eating disorders except cultural attitude toward weight. Yeah, culturally, eating disorders are definitely more prevalent in cultures that prioritize being rail thin. Lack of willpower, I'm going to leave that. That sounds kind of suspicious. Genetic tendencies, yeah, genes really predispose you to most things. Family history of eating disorders, okay, yeah, or food obsessions. Yeah, the answer here is going to be lack of willpower. People with eating disorders don't lack willpower. Okay, that's not an appropriate assessment. Okay, the Yerkes-Dodson law, oh, buddy, it's back, predicts that most people would perform an easy task best if they are at a high level of arousal, a low level arousal, a baseline state, a level of self-actualization, or a state of homeostasis. Okay, this is going to be an easy task, like a sport or a recital, high level of arousal. Which of the following are reasons why intrinsic motivation might be more advantageous than extrinsic motivation? Well, what was the difference here? So intrinsic is coming from within, liking to do something just for the sake of doing it. Extrinsic is going to be external things that are going to motivate you to do it. Like maybe I go to school because I want to have good grades, or I'm doing this review guide because I want to do well on the AP exam. Okay. Intrinsic motivation would just be like, I'm doing this review guide because I love psychology. Okay, so intrinsic motivation might be more enduring since extrinsic motivation is usually temporary. That's true. I'll leave that. Intrinsic motivations are easier and more convenient to provide. No, not really. It's not easy to make someone just like something. It's just kind of natural. Intrinsic motivations are higher on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That has nothing to do with intrinsic or extrinsic. Intrinsic motivations are more likely to be primary drives. Extrinsic motivations are secondary drives. So primary drives are biological. Secondary drives are going to be associated with primary drives. They're just kind of trying to trick you here. It's just mixing up different vocabulary, or intrinsic motivations are more effective with a wider variety of individuals. Okay, the answer here is going to be intrinsic motivations may be more enduring since extrinsic motivation is usually temporary. Remember, if I take something that was originally intrinsic, like I love learning. When I was in elementary school, I loved to go to school every day and learn new things. And then I start putting grades on it, extrinsic motivation here and extrinsic motivation there. What's going to happen is that my love for that thing is going to decrease steadily. We call that over justification. Like you're over justifying your love for something. And then you actually want to do it less. So if my son was addicted to video games, I should pay him to play video games. There would be an initial spike in playing video games, but then he would like it less and less. Okay, what does Schachter's two-factor theory state about the relationship between emotion and physiological reaction? Emotions are caused by physiological reactions. For example, we feel excited because our heart begins to race. That's the James Lange theory. Physiological reactions are caused by our emotions. Our experience of fear causes our breathing to increase. That's kind of like the common sense view of emotion. A combination of physiological reactions and our cognitive interpretation of an event produces emotion. That is correct. Two factors. Excessive time spent in the resistance phase of Cellier's general adaptation syndrome can contribute to increased time needed to adapt to new emotional situations, decreased motivation to perform novel tasks, stress-related illnesses like ulcers or heart conditions, a reduction in the drive to achieve goals, or resistance to learning skills for novel tasks. The answer here is going to be stress-related diseases like ulcers or heart conditions. Essentially, the more chronic stress you are under, the more likely your immune system is to break down. So we know that from psychoneuroimmunology. A lot of people, when they were talking about the attendance question with gas, said that like we are adapting now to our new environment. That's not really what I was going for. I was more going for being under chronic stress, as we are during this situation, is going to make our endocrine system release cortisol. It's going to cause more or make us more susceptible to stress-related illness, and it's an unfortunate reality. The balanced physiological state we are driven to attain by satisfying our needs is called homeostasis. A high score on Holmes and Ray's Social Readjustment Rating Scale, SSRS, correlates with, this is a very common psychometric assessment that is going to measure your incidence of stress-related illness. Okay, because the higher your score, the more likely you are to encounter a stress-related illness over the course of the year. All right. What was one major criticism of the James Lange theory of emotion? Emotions are usually associated with one specific physiological change in the body. No, that would support it, right? Because we would say, oh, you're having this specific arousal, that's happiness. That's surprise. That's what have you. Physiological changes do not vary in intensity. That's not going to be a criticism. Different emotions are not necessarily associated with different patterns of physiological responses. That is the correct answer. Okay? Because if I'm afraid or I'm surprised or it's just going to be similar types of reactions. Like my heart rate is going to rise. I'm going to not be able to breathe properly. I might sweat. And so forth. Okay. Which of the following statements supports the results of the Ekman-Friesen experiment? So Paul Ekman was the one who came up with the basic emotions, and he had gone to a very remote area in Papua New Guinea, and shown those people, the four people, different emotional expressions without having any exposure to Western culture, and they were able to identify those emotional expressions. So Paul Ekman is just really, his results show that emotional expressions are universal and innate. Okay, so between 5 and 7 months of age, infants show fear. That suggests that emotions are innate. It is difficult to communicate with people of different cultures. Well, that would go against it. People show disgust for different reasons. Babies smile due to modeling behavior. No, that's learned, not innate. And children exhibit emotion differently than adults do. No, it would be this. Between 5 and 7 months of age, infants show fear. Which statement best defines display rules? Now, although facial expressions are universal, display rules are not. Okay, display rules are going to be the specific rules that govern your emotional displays to other people. So it would be this. Many cultures do not allow public displays of emotion. And then there's a section in your 5 steps and also in other textbooks that isn't covered in your textbook about different types of conflicts. Okay, that you could either have an approach conflict, an approach avoidance conflict, an avoidance conflict, or a multiple approach avoidance conflict. Okay, it's pretty self-explanatory. It does appear on the AP exam every so often. Larry really wants to buy his wife the diamond watch she has always wanted for her birthday, but he knows that he should be more conservative with his money. What type of conflict is he facing? Approach, avoidance, positive approach, or negative approach. Well, first of all, there is no such thing as a positive approach or negative approach conflict. So approach would be that something is good about it. Avoidance would be that something is bad about it. Okay. So he really wants to buy his wife the diamond watch, so that would be approach. And then he should be more conservative with his money, that would be avoidance. So the answer here is approach avoidance. Avoidance is like, when you have two terrible options that you don't want to have to deal with. And approach is the best kind of conflict to get because you're like, I win in either situation here. Okay, an individual's subjective experience and feeling of being either a male or a female is referred to as a gender role, a sexual orientation, gender identity, transgender, or sex categories. Answer here is gender identity. Gender identity. Okay, gender roles are going to be prescribed roles by society that are expected of males and females. Sexual orientation is who you're attracted to. Transgender is when your gender identity does not match your sex at birth. And sex categories is not a term. All right. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, an adolescent who is beginning to form serious romantic relationships would be at what level? Okay, so we have PS BASA, right? Physiological, safety, belongingness, esteem, self-actualization, and then if you really want to go beyond, that self-transcendence. Okay, so belongingness then would be level 3. Which of the following best defines set point? It refers to how efficiently the body breaks food down. No, that's your metabolism. It refers to how quickly the body turns food into energy. Metabolism. Controls the body metabolism. That's okay. We'll leave that. Plays a role in influencing appetite. I guess, kind of. In the Key study it did, but when they were, essentially starved. It refers to a certain level of body fat that the body maintains. Yes. The set point is going to be the certain level of body fat that the body maintains, and then your basal metabolic rate is going to change as you get within that set point. And now we don't really use set point anymore. It's more like a settling point of like a range of weights. So as you get too thin, your basal metabolic rate is going to get slower, and as you have more weight on you, your basal metabolic rate will speed up. All right, so thanks very much for watching. If you did, I miss all of you. I really hope to see you soon, and at least I can see you virtually. So have a great day. Be well. Bye-bye.